My name is Ethan, and I never imagined I'd be telling this story. I used to believe my life was stable, predictable, maybe even boring to some people, but safe. I had a wife, a home, a steady job. I thought I had built something real. But sometimes the people you trust most are the ones sharpening the knife behind your back. I met Claire in college. She was beautiful, sharp, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and own it without saying a word. I wasn't the flashy guy. I was the reliable one. Maybe that's why she picked me. We started dating young, and by the time we graduated, we were engaged. Everyone said we were perfect together. I believed them. The first few years of marriage weren't bad. We had the typical ups and downs, arguments about money, about whose turn it was to cook, about her wanting to go out more than I did. But I always thought those were normal things, the kind of stuff any couple works through. What I didn't realize was that Claire didn't want to work through anything. She wanted more. More excitement, more attention, more of everything I couldn't give while working long hours to build a future for us. I should have seen the signs. The late nights at the office, the sudden obsession with her appearance, new clothes, new perfume, the way her phone was suddenly glued to her hand. When I asked, she'd laugh it off. "Ethan, don't be paranoid. Just because you're boring doesn't mean I am." Those words stung, but I brushed them aside. I thought she was just restless. I thought a vacation or a change of scenery would help. Then one night, I found the first undeniable crack. Claire had left her laptop open on the couch while she went to shower. Normally, I'd never snoop, but a message notification popped up. The preview read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait for round 2. My stomach dropped. I clicked it. The conversation scrolled up in bright, undeniable detail. It wasn't some flirtation. It was an affair. And not just with anyone, it was with a guy named Darren, a coworker she had once described as just a friend. When she came out of the shower, humming, wrapped in a towel, she saw my face and froze. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I just asked, "How long?" Her expression shifted from shock to defiance in seconds. "Ethan, don't be dramatic. It just happened. How long?" I repeated. She sighed. "A few months. Maybe more. Months. Maybe more." My world tilted. "I work myself into the ground for us," I said quietly. "And this is what you do?" She crossed her arms. "You don't get it. Darren makes me feel alive. He makes me laugh. You just exist, Ethan." Those words burned worse than the betrayal. I thought we'd fight, maybe try counseling, maybe something. But she already had her plan. A week later, she handed me divorce papers with a smirk. "You'll be fine," she said. "You've always been fine. I deserve to be happy." Her happiness, apparently, was tied to Darren. At first, I was devastated. I barely ate. I barely slept. The house felt like a tomb. And then, as the weeks passed, humiliation set in. Not only had she left me for someone else, but she flaunted it. Social media posts of their dates, their trips, their smiling faces. Friends whispered. Coworkers avoided eye contact. I was the fool who got replaced. But the real blow came when I realized she wasn't just divorcing me. She was coming for everything. Half the house, half my savings, even part of my retirement account. And Darren? He came to the hearings with her, sitting in the back like he was watching a comedy show, smirking every time she lied about me. They laughed together like they had already won, like I was just a stepping stone in their grand love story. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. But then something happened that changed everything. At one of the early hearings, the judge asked for documentation, financial records, proof of property ownership, details Claire hadn't expected to be questioned on. I noticed her smile falter for the first time. It hit me then. Maybe this wasn't over. Maybe the story didn't end with me humiliated and them victorious. Maybe, just maybe, I had a chance to turn the tables. And from that moment on, I stopped being the broken husband they mocked. I started becoming something else, a man with a plan. After I discovered Claire's affair and she hit me with divorce papers, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The real pain wasn't just losing her. It was watching how she and Darren carried themselves after. They acted like they'd already won. Whenever we had pre-trial meetings with the lawyers, Darren tagged along like he was auditioning for husband number 2. He'd sit beside Claire, whispering in her ear, grinning like the whole thing was entertainment. Claire ate it up. She'd flash him little looks, squeeze his hand, then glance back at me with that smug smile. At first, I couldn't handle it. I'd leave those meetings sick, sometimes pulling over on the way home just to catch my breath. They weren't just breaking me, they were mocking me while they did it. I'll never forget one moment in particular. We were leaving the courthouse after filing an initial motion. Darren leaned in close as we walked out the doors and said loud enough for me to hear, "Don't worry, man. I'll take good care of her in the house. The house, my house. The one I'd bought years before I ever met Claire. That was the day something inside me hardened. Up until then, I had been trying to survive. Just get through the paperwork, keep my head above water. But hearing him claim something I'd built before either of them was in the picture, that lit a fire. I went home, pulled out every file box I owned, and started digging. Mortgage statements, deed records, tax returns, bank transfers. Every scrap of paper that showed the house was mine long before Claire came along. I wasn't going to let them walk away laughing. The next few weeks were brutal. Claire's lawyer painted me as financially controlling, saying I hadn't allowed Claire to pursue her own dreams. Darren actually testified in an early session, that he'd seen firsthand how unhappy she'd been. The audacity nearly made me laugh. He'd seen firsthand because he was the reason she was sneaking out at night, but I kept my cool. My lawyer told me, let them overplay their hand. Judges hate arrogance. They hate liars even more. So that's what I did. I sat there while Claire lied through her teeth, saying she had contributed to the mortgage, that she'd invested in renovations, that she deserved half because she built a life in that house. Darren sat in the back row, smirking, whispering, even chuckling sometimes when she spoke. It was humiliating sitting there while they treated my life like a joke. But at the same time, I knew something they didn't. I had proof. One evening, after another grueling day in court, I stayed up late combing through my files again. That's when I found it, something I'd almost forgotten about. A document from years ago showing not just that I'd bought the house before Claire, but that I'd refinanced it during our marriage into my name alone. It was ironclad. When I showed it to my lawyer, his eyes lit up. "Ethan, this changes everything." They're banking on the judge believing it's marital property, but this is the smoking gun. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Meanwhile, Claire and Darren only grew bolder. They posted photos of themselves on vacation, laughing poolside while I was scraping to cover legal fees. Claire showed up to hearings in designer outfits she'd never been able to afford when we were together. She wanted me to see her shining, wanted me to feel like I'd lost. And Darren? He went out of his way to taunt me. At one point in the courthouse parking lot, he leaned against his car and said, "Man, you should thank me. I'm giving her the life you couldn't." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to. Believe me, I wanted to wipe that smug grin off his face. But because I knew the real revenge wouldn't come from words. It would come from facts. From the one person whose opinion actually mattered, the judge. So I stayed quiet. I kept gathering evidence. I cataloged every expense I'd paid on my own, every repair I'd done, every cent that tied the house to me and me alone. By the time the final hearing approached, I had a binder thick enough to choke on. Claire thought she was walking into her victory lap, ready to split assets and strut out with Darren by her side. But I was ready for the bombshell. And deep down, I hoped the judge was too. The final court date circled my calendar like a storm warning. Every day leading up to it, I felt the pressure building, emails from my lawyer, last-minute filings, reminders to stay calm, stay factual, stay ready. Still, no matter how much I prepared, I knew walking into that courtroom meant walking into a fire. Claire and Darren treated it like a festival. They arrived early, hand in hand, dressed to the nines. Claire wore a bright red dress, loud, triumphant. Darren was in a tailored suit, smirking like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. When they saw me walk in with my lawyer and my plain black binder, they actually laughed. Claire leaned close enough for me to hear and whispered, "Ready to lose everything?" Darren chuckled. Don't worry, man. We'll send you a postcard from the house once we redecorate. The audacity almost made me laugh out loud. Almost. Instead, I took a breath and sat down. The judge entered. The bailiff called us to order, and just like that, my future was in session. Claire's lawyer went first, spinning the same tired story. Claire had contributed emotionally, supported me, helped make the house a home. She deserved half. He spoke with the kind of confidence that only comes from arrogance, waving his arms as though passion could replace evidence. Then came Claire's testimony. She sat on the stand, legs crossed, voice honeyed but firm. I put my heart into that home, she said. I may not have written checks for every bill, but I sacrificed for our life together. That house is just as much mine as his. From the back, Darren snickered. The judge shot him a look, but he didn't care. Claire went on, layering lies over half-truths, painting herself as the victim of a cold, unfeeling husband who kept her trapped. She even claimed Darren was helping her heal from the trauma of our marriage. I sat there, jaw tight, fists clenched under the table. Every word was like a knife, but my lawyer leaned over and whispered, "Patience. Let her dig the hole deeper." Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the stand, heart pounding but face calm. My lawyer started simple. "Mr. Carter, when did you purchase the house?" 3 years before I met Claire. "And whose name was on the original deed?" "Mine." We walked through the basics, the mortgage, the down payments, the renovations I had done myself. I showed receipts, contractor invoices, even photos of me sanding floors, painting walls, fixing leaks. Piece by piece, I laid out a picture Claire couldn't erase. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. My lawyer slid the refinancing document onto the projector. "And Mr. Carter, can you tell the court whose name appears on this?" "Mine," I said. "Just mine." The courtroom went silent. Claire's lawyer froze, blinking at the page as though it had materialized from thin air. Claire's face drained of color, her confident smirk collapsing into confusion. "That's impossible," she blurted out. She turned to Darren as if he might have an answer. He didn't. For once his smirk was gone. The judge adjusted her glasses, scanning the document carefully. "So to be clear, Mr. Carter, this refinancing removed any possibility of joint ownership during the marriage?" "Yes, Your Honor. And you have proof of sole payments since then?" I handed over the binder, months of statements, canceled checks, transfer records. She flipped through, nodding slowly. Claire's lawyer scrambled, trying to object, trying to claim it was irrelevant, but the judge wasn't buying it. "Counsel, this goes directly to ownership." "Sit down." Claire looked like she'd swallowed glass. Darren muttered something under his breath, but the bailiff barked, "Quiet in the gallery." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the balance shift. When my testimony ended, my lawyer delivered closing arguments with steady precision. "Your Honor, my client isn't asking for more than he deserves. He isn't asking to punish Mrs. Carter for her choices outside the marriage. He's simply asking to keep what was always his. The evidence speaks for itself." Claire's lawyer tried to salvage things in his closing, but it was weak, desperate. He repeated the word fair a dozen times, but fairness doesn't trump facts. As the judge prepared to speak, I saw Claire lean toward Darren. She whispered something, and for the first time, he didn't laugh. He just stared straight ahead. The judge cleared her throat. "I've reviewed the evidence presented. The house in question was purchased prior to the marriage, refinanced solely into Mr. Carter's name, and maintained with his separate funds. There is no credible evidence to suggest it should be treated as marital property. Therefore, the property will remain solely in the possession of Mr. Carter." The gavel hit, and just like that, the smirk vanished. Claire gasped audibly. "What? No! This isn't fair!" Darren muttered. "You've got to be kidding me." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down. This court has ruled." I sat there, heart pounding, a calm washing over me like a tide. They had mocked me, laughed at me, paraded their affair like a victory lap. But in the end, it wasn't me who was humiliated. It was them. The sound of the gavel still echoed in my chest when Claire's voice cracked through the courtroom. "This isn't fair," she shouted, half rising from her chair. "I gave years of my life to him. I built that home with him. You can't just... The judge cut her off with a single raised hand. Mrs. Carter, sit down. This court has reviewed the facts. This is not about feelings. This is about ownership, documentation, and law. Sit down. Claire froze, trembling, her cheeks blotched red. For a moment, she looked like she might scream. Then she slumped into her chair, lips pressed thin, eyes darting toward Darren like maybe he could save her. But Darren wasn't smirking anymore. He looked annoyed, even disgusted, as though the woman he'd been celebrating with had suddenly turned into dead weight. The judge wasn't finished. She shuffled through the papers, adjusting her glasses. Now, as for the joint accounts, the financial records clearly show withdrawals made by Mrs. Carter in the weeks leading up to these proceedings. Those withdrawals were significant, and the court finds that they were made in bad faith. My lawyer leaned forward, calm as ever. We're requesting reimbursement, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Granted. Mrs. Carter, you will reimburse Mr. Carter for the funds you withdrew to the sum of $18,432. Furthermore, the credit card debt incurred after the separation date is your responsibility, not his. It felt like the air in the room shifted. Claire gasped again, shaking her head violently. No, that's not right. Darren and I... The judge's gavel cracked the desk. I am not interested in Darren. He is not a party to this case. This is between you and your husband. You made those charges. You will be responsible for them. The gallery was silent, save for the scribbling of a clerk's pen. I sat perfectly still, staring at the wood grain on the desk in front of me. But inside, my chest swelled. Months of humiliation, months of being mocked and treated like a fool, and now the truth was carving through their lies like a blade. Claire turned, wild-eyed, to Darren. Say something, she hissed. He leaned away, his lips curling in disgust. What do you want me to do, Claire? I'm not the one who maxed out credit cards. The look on her face when he said that, shock, betrayal, desperation, it was like watching a tower collapse in slow motion. For the first time, she realized Darren wasn't her savior. He was just a spectator, and now that the show was turning ugly, he wanted out. The judge continued, tone steady, uncompromising. As for spousal support, Mrs. Carter, the evidence shows you voluntarily left the marital home to cohabit with another individual. The court will not reward that decision. Your petition for support is denied. Claire's hands flew to her face. You can't do this. I can, and I have, the judge replied. Darren groaned and muttered under his breath. This is a joke. The judge's eyes snapped to him. Mr. Miles, you will be silent or I will have you removed from this courtroom. That shut him up. By the time the judge read the final summary, house remains mine. Joint assets split fairly, Claire responsible for her own reckless spending. The air in the room felt electric. Claire's earlier arrogance had dissolved into tears. Darren slumped in his chair, avoiding her touch, his phone clenched in his hand like he was already planning his escape. When the gavel struck one final time, it was over. I stood slowly, gathering my binder. My lawyer shook my hand firmly, whispering, You did good. Keep your head high. Claire stumbled to her feet, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Ethan, please, this isn't what I wanted. I looked her in the eye, calm and steady. You thought wrong, Claire. You thought you could lie, cheat, laugh at me, and walk away with everything I worked for. You thought you could humiliate me and I'd just take it. But today you learned something. She blinked through her tears. What? I leaned in just enough for her to hear. You underestimated me. Her lips parted, but no words came. I turned and walked toward the door. As I passed Darren, I caught his eye. For the first time, he wasn't smug. He wasn't confident. He looked cornered, irritated, already regretting every choice that brought him into this mess. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Outside the courtroom, the cool air hit me like a blessing. My lawyer clapped my shoulder. I'll be in touch about the reimbursement timeline. Go home, Ethan. Rest. Home. My home. Still mine. As I stepped out onto the courthouse steps, I glanced back through the glass doors. Claire and Darren were still inside. She was reaching for him, crying, but he was pulling away, shaking his head. The cracks in their shiny new relationship were already showing. And me, for the first time in months, I felt free. This wasn't just a legal victory. It was justice. It was karma. They had walked into court laughing at me, certain they had destroyed me. But the judge had dropped the bombshell that stripped their arrogance bare and left them standing in ruins. I walked down the steps with my head high, binder tucked under my arm like a badge of survival. They thought I was finished. But really, I was just getting started. The first night after the ruling, I slept like a man who finally put down a weight he'd been carrying so long he forgot what empty hands felt like. No 3 a.m. court anxiety jolts. No replaying of Claire's smirk or Darren's chuckle. Just quiet, the kind that fills the bones. Morning brought logistics. My lawyer emailed a summary, the order on reimbursements, deadlines, and the note that if Claire stalled, we'd petition for wage garnishment. He recommended changing the remaining shared passwords, confirming utilities, and documenting the condition of the house. I made coffee, opened a new notebook, and started a list. Not out of fear anymore, out of something I hadn't felt in months. Control. By noon, the texts began. Claire first, we need to talk. This isn't who we are. Can we meet? 2 minutes later, I didn't mean for it to go like this. Then, Darren is being weird. I think he needs space. I need you to be fair. Fair. I stared at the word until it blurred. My thumb hovered, but I didn't reply. The court order was fair. The facts were fair. The rest, what she wanted from me emotionally, was a debt I no longer carried. Darren texted once, a masterpiece of minimal effort. No hard feelings, right? I put the phone face down and sanded a nick out of the banister instead. The wood took shape under my hands, small work, immediate result. It felt good to fix something that stayed fixed. News traveled faster than I expected. Not gossip, just the quiet recalibration people do when a story they thought they knew shifts. A couple of Claire's old friends reached out with neutral check-ins. Co-workers who'd assumed I was the punchline paused by my desk, asked about a project, and let a respectful silence do the rest. I didn't explain, didn't relive. I simply met their eyes, and it was enough. The reimbursement check didn't arrive on the first deadline. My lawyer filed the motion he said we'd file, routine as a morning alarm. A week later, the funds hit my account in 2 transfers, one from Claire's job, one, unexpectedly, from a Zelle memo that read D. I didn't need a last name. The money wasn't an apology. It was the unromantic arithmetic of accountability. A friend convinced me to see a therapist. I told him I was fine. He said, "You're stable." That's not the same thing. The therapist's office was unremarkable. Plants, soft lamp, a box of tissues I pretended not to notice. I talked about how humiliation feels like heat and ice at the same time, how it rewires your sense of what's true. She nodded, asked careful questions, then said something simple. "You stayed with yourself when other people left." "That matters," I didn't cry. Not there. But later, in the car, I let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a laugh. Relief has its own language. I started cooking again. Not post-breakup performative steak dinners, just food that took time. A pot of chili that simmered for hours, bread that rose twice and made the whole house smell like an apology no one owed me. I fixed the gutter, stained the fence, replaced a stubborn outlet. The house changed back into a home with a speed that surprised me. Maybe things heal quickly when the source of the damage stops insisting it's a feature. There were setbacks. The second month, Claire sent a long email accusing me of weaponizing the court and ruining her life. 2 days later, a shorter one. "Sorry, I'm overwhelmed." I didn't know he'd bail. It wasn't my job to respond. I forwarded both to my lawyer, then went for a run that left me breathless and rinsed clean. The body helps the mind remember the difference between a wave and a tide. Both feel big, but only one recedes. I saw Claire once at the grocery store. She reached for the same carton of eggs, then snatched her hand back like the cardboard burned. For a second, she looked like the woman I married, the one with laugh lines at the corners of her eyes who used to pick the smallest avocado because she liked a challenge. Then the years between us reasserted themselves, and we stood there as 2 people who had learned too much about each other to be kind and not enough to be cruel. She said, "Ethan," in a voice that carried 100 unfinished sentences. I nodded and stepped aside. Letting her pass felt less like losing and more like keeping. Darren didn't resurface, not directly. A mutual acquaintance mentioned he'd transferred offices. New start, the acquaintance said, with the tone people use when they mean cut and run. I felt nothing. Or rather, I felt a small, precise satisfaction that didn't ask to be fed. The point had never been to hurt him. The point had been to stop letting him write my ending. On a Saturday that pretended to be spring, I hosted friends for a small cookout. Nothing loud, just burgers, a playlist that didn't require explaining, paper plates in a stack. Someone brought a dog. Someone else brought a dessert that needed a spoon and faith. Halfway through the evening, I caught a whiff of charcoal and cut grass and realized the simplest truth. Life had not been destroyed. It had been edited. The paragraphs that made no sense were gone. What remained read clean. A month later, I boxed the last of Claire's things. Not as an act of vengeance, just completion. I labeled the lid with her name, set it by the door, and texted her a pickup window with 3 options. She chose one, arrived on time, stood with her hands in the sleeves of a sweater I'd never seen. "You look good," she said, which is what people say when they don't know how to say, "You look like someone I don't get to narrate anymore." I held the door. She lifted the box. "For what it's worth," she added. "I didn't expect it to end like that." "Neither did I said. "But you chose it." "I chose after." She nodded. The kind of nod that concedes a point without agreeing to like it. "Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye, Claire." When the door closed, the house exhaled. Maybe it was just the HVAC kicking on. Maybe it was the last ghost leaving. I won't pretend endings cure everything. Some nights, the memory of humiliation still flares like a match struck in a dark room. But the light goes out faster now. I know which thoughts to feed and which to let go hungry. I know how to tell the difference between solitude and loneliness. I know that silence can be a friend if you offer it a chair. People ask if I'll date again. Probably, carefully. Not from fear, but from respect, for myself, for time, for the fact that love is a thing you grow, not a stage you rent. I've learned the cost of mistaking spectacle for substance. As for revenge, this is the part no one puts in the movie. The most satisfying version isn't theatrical. It's practical. It's a judge reading a sentence that puts the pieces back where they belong. It's your key still working in your own front door. It's a morning where the only approval you need is the way the coffee tastes. It's building a life that no longer has space for people who mislabel your kindness as weakness. My ex-wife and her boyfriend laughed in court. They were so sure the world bent for them that they forgot about the one thing louder than arrogance: proof. The judge didn't rescue me. She recognized reality. The bombshell wasn't magic. It was the truth landing where it was always going to land once I stopped trying to cushion it. Now I wake up in a house I paid for, in a life I choose. I open the blinds, and the same sun that rose on my worst days rises on this one, indifferent and generous. I brew coffee, lace my shoes, and step outside. The fence needs one more coat of stain. The tomatoes might take this year if I'm patient. The future does not feel like a hallway I'm dragged down anymore. It feels like a door I can open. They walked out of that courtroom smaller than they came in. I walked out exactly the size I am, and that in the end is the only revenge that lasts.